Okay.
Oh, we are live.
Coming on. We're coming on. We're enlightening. Hello, everybody. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Ben. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. I'm feeling a bit stressed today, but you know what? We'll get it done. We'll get through it.
The words of a professional. Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, I don't. We've been preambling for the last half hour, so now we don't know what to talk about.
Where do we? But we promised everyone it was going to be about MiSTer FPGA.
MiSTer FPGA. Yes, I finally am developing the muscle memory to type the word MiSTer with the right capitalizations. It's which when you're missing a finger on your left hand, it's different. It's
why did they capitalize the S in MiSTer as well as the M?
And the T. I have no idea. Unfortunately, the whole genesis of the MiSTer project is not something I know about. However, I will say that I jumped over to the Discord channel on MiSTer FPGA, and they were extremely helpful. Kitrinix helped me a bunch and got me up and running in just minutes. It was like having a live support team. So I'll bet they know the history over there if you were to ask. We could ask them live on the air.
Atari ST might be part of it. Yes, World of Retro Computing says the ST may come from Atari. That could well be. That's a pretty good plausible
Atari ST.
And this may be someone who's actually the designer and actually telling us. But I don't know because most of our names on the chats are obfuscated.
So I just saw Andre Fashit. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he just joined. Andre, and I helped him with DRAM some 10 years ago. So, hey, Andre, nice to see you.
Yeah, it's a lot of very cool people joining us today. So, yeah. I would really like to get together a MiSTer FPGA, but I still haven't. 2 years ago, I bought, when Raspberry Pi 4 first launched, I went and bought a 3 because they got cheaper. And all the bits to make a retro arcade using Raspberry Pi and RetroPie. It's all still in a box, and that's how it goes when you're a very distractible person like me. I've got a lot of very cool things like this that I'd love to do and just don't end up getting to a lot of them. Buy all the parts and then never start.
Right.
Another thing comes along or another fire I have to put out. So anyway, but Show us the MiSTer FPGA. So we briefly mentioned this last week as well. So you've got, there it is. So that is a Thoracic DE10 Nano, which is it's a Cyclone 5 development board. Is that right?
I believe so.
And so we're already up to Cyclone 5. Now, I have an ancestor of that, the Cyclone 3 development board, or maybe I sold it on eBay a while ago. I don't remember. And I was wondering if the code could be ported to Cyclone 3 because it has a lot of the resources on it that you would need for something like this. But I read somewhere that DE10 Nano is non-negotiable. Like you must use a DE10 Nano for MiSTer FPGA. And I'm wondering if that's only because of the custom I/O board that you need to go with it, or if it's because that board has IP.
It's got HDMI. That's one thing, whereas the DE0 did not have HDMI on it. So it accesses the video output, though you can buy analog output adapters. So I'll mention this. If you Google MiSTer FPGA accessories, you'll find some really good websites. I think I went to the MiSTer add-on website, got my stuff real quick. They're all pro about knowing what you need. So you can go there and buy an entire kit if you want, if you have a DE10.
Okay. So, and I've seen
the
some
I/O board is optional.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. So one could do it with just a DE10 Nano then?
And I had to buy, to run the C128, I had to buy some extra memory. So I bought 128, I guess, meg 4K. I don't think
Hold on. You're telling me to reproduce a Commodore 128 on a DE10 Nano, you need more memory than's already on the DE10. In fact, more memory than what's in the Cyclone 5 chip.
I believe so. It didn't start till it would run Pong, but not the C64 till I put memory on it. If anybody knows how much memory is needed and why, by all means, chat. By the way, today's show is very much a live chat show. That's how we're
definitely jump in, make comments, ask us questions. It'll be really asking Bill questions because I'm not the one with a DE10 Nano on my desk. I don't have one.
Right.
But Bill does.
Right. So so there is IO options where you can interface to your favorite controller or to your favorite joysticks. You can even do an analog output. I'm using just a naked DE10 with a USB extender, and they recommend the USB extender just simply to add power to the USB. And I noticed my keyboard kept disconnecting, my wireless Bluetooth keyboard, until I added the USB extender to it. So that's the one accessory I have. And then I have
did see that extra RAM module does allow for a whole lot of additional cores.
Whole lot of additional stuff. Yeah.
So and it's okay, so it is just regular SD RAM from Alliance by the look of it. So it's a $65 board.
Right.
It feels a bit pricey for SD RAM. But okay.
Well, I was going to say one of our users was talking about, or was it Kurt was talking that he bought the board during the pandemic with no parts, just so he'd have something to do during the pandemic. So he was hand soldering the SD RAM chips. So you're right.
I have a tray of probably these exact same chips, actually. Yeah, but I had them for another project.
All right, so Reine's chimed in now. Whoops, that's the wrong one. They move sometimes right as I go to click on them. So John just got his own DE10. So he according to him, they are now shipping out of Terra ASIC.
And okay, now it's making more sense to me as well that there's some underlying
architectural memory flow issue.
So to me, it looks more like it's the whole thing's based on a Linux subsystem that's running virtual machines or hardware accelerated virtual machines or something, right? I don't know. We should have a look at the source code. This is open source,
right?
From what I read, right? So maybe we could have a look through that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
More details. I'll
I never thought of it as a Linux, though I know the Linux core is in there because early on, that's what I kept doing with FPGAs. So I was always dropping a Linux core on them just because I could,
Mr. Devil, there it is on Mr. Devil on GitHub. All the files you want in your MiSTer for distribution. Then there's others, VIC-20, UK 101, PSX. So this covers some pretty decent number of machines, even up into the 90s by the look of it. So
right.
Let's see, hardware MiSTer, that's for daughter boards, main MiSTer binary and wiki.
So someone just asked about somebody's saying your audio's foobar. It doesn't sound bad to me.
Oh, maybe it was a compression thing for a second there, but I mean, shouldn't be from my side unless I'm talking too loud and clipping. So let me know if I'm too loud. I'm seeing a lot of this. A lot of the source is actually C++, which to me implies it's well, I'm not looking at Verilog or VHDL here, so either it's converted to hardware using the Intel tools. That could be the case. But this looks to me this is all MiSTer FPGA is all a visual. So it's a VCX project. So looks like the developers were using at least Microsoft Code, Visual Studio Code.
All right.
So yeah, I'm just curious how that works, but I haven't used the Altera or Intel FPGA tools very recently. It's been a while, so to me that looks like they've got a basic system on FPGA, and they're just. So what's inside the FPGA then? It must be. Is it? What FPGA is on the DE10 Nano? Let's look at that, because maybe it's one that's got an ARM core built in or something, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm actually asking over on the MiSTer FPGA Discord.
Because if it isn't, then maybe the secret sauce here is that actually all the development is done in C++, but it's hardware accelerated using some of the automation that comes in the Intel FPGA tools. Because they all do it. Altera, this is back in the day when it was Altera, they were one of the first to actually do C to hardware. Altium also did it, and that was one of my favorite things. We had a C to hardware compiler in Altium Designer. They took all of that stuff out, which sucks, but whatever. Anyway.
Okay, so we're starting to get some answers for the...
dual core, it has dual core Cortex A9, so that's why it's developed in C++. Okay.
Well, now we got Timothy P saying the cores themselves are Verilog or VHDL, so I'm assuming the Linux is a framework for loading the cores.
That's interesting. So then what in the MiSTer FPGA, what are we using the dual core Cortex A9 processor for?
Right.
It's for running maybe the underlying Linux system that provides
HDMI
services.
Or something,
maybe
or memory management.
Yeah, that would make sense. So it's quite a complex little thing, this MiSTer FPGA.
Right. Okay, so we got it correct on that. All right, so let me show what it looks like. Oh, and it's gone dark. Ha ha! Too funny. Well, no, I was going to show the actual interface. Let me start it again.
So, but to get this running,
I think I have a heat issue.
You've got your. Okay, you have to power cycle it.
There we go. I power cycled it.
There it is.
And of course, they picked white noise, which means that compressors around the world hate this. Matter of fact, you see it screwing up.
So it's no good for StreamYard.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm having a heat problem. I just lost my MiSTer FPGA. Let me try it again here. My frame grabber might hate it too. So we're going to go directly into one of the emulations this time.
Okay, so we're going for a console? Or?
Let's go for... The only ones I know how to work are Commodores, so I was just going to go for a 128. Supposedly, there's a way you can get... notice this latency to load.
That
the
makes
main
sense.
thing here is there's no jail bars.
Right. So here's the thing, Bill. That load time, so one of the things that Altera also pioneered that's really good is partial reconfiguration on the fly. So because the FPGAs are static RAM based for the most part, you can have a system on one section of the FPGA running and have that reprogram another part of it while it's running. And so I think we're making use of that here, where the cores are soft core whole systems, and it's loading them from flash, putting it in there and booting to it, or booting it and jumping to it. And that's why there's some delay, because it's reconfiguring a portion of the FPGA fabric.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody said I can bring up the jail bars by going to F12. So we'll try that. Oh, there it is. I was under hardware when I looked for it.
Vic Jalbaz.
Oh, look at that. That looks like my computer.
There it is.
So somebody wrote a computer. I mean, and we knew back then this would happen, right? But we were also working at 1 megahertz, so we knew it wasn't happening that day or later that year.
Yeah. So do you have any applications to run on it?
No, I don't. The only thing I know to run is, in the case of this, the Easter egg, which is embedded in the BIOS. I think that's how. Nah, I blew it.
The question was, is the Easter egg included in the core?
It is, but let me try and 32800, 123, 45, 6. No, I can't remember my own Easter egg. I didn't write it, so that's why I can't remember.
SysT?
Yeah, hang on a second. Get rid of the comment on the screen, and I will find the Easter egg. Thank you. You'd think it was 40 years ago or something. I'm typing on the wrong keyboard.
Oh, okay. We're doing the search for it.
Right.
This is cool that it's got the memory. It's got. I remember the whole winter break in Australia in 1988. I went to stay with some family friends who were living in Hobart, Tasmania, or just outside of Hobart. And I was there for 3 weeks, and they had a C128. It was, I think, a 128D. It was in a separate case with a separated keyboard.
Right. That's my favorite one.
That was so awesome. And they only had an amber monitor. They didn't have a color monitor. But I spent hours and hours and hours that winter break just messing around with that thing. And a lot of it was playing Fort Apocalypse on the 64 emulation mode.
There's the Easter egg.
There it is. Hardware.
So, yeah, they got that. And what's cool is in here.
Wait. Did you say it was hardware even back then?
They did that without telling me till after the ROMs were released. So that was a gift from the programmers.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And when doing the Easter egg, we found that the V for von Ertwein had a problem. It had a bar over it. So we had to rev the font ROM. Our QA department was so lousy, they didn't find the V problem. We found it when we did the Easter egg.
No way.
And it was just a byte. The first byte was all F's, you know?
That's 100% business case study justification for doing Easter eggs.
That's cool.
Easter eggs will find you things that your QA people won't. So,
right.
Software and hardware developers out there, include your Easter eggs.
Oh, and we have I don't remember the commands, but one of my favorite things about where we were at Commodore at the time is Fred Bowen had started including a ROM monitor in all of the code. And we would use the computer itself to fix the computer itself. Yeah.
Yep. That's a luxurious thing to be able to do. And software developers or people who study computer science today have no idea how easy it is.
Right. All right. So let's pick some more computers.
Yeah.
If anybody knows how I can reboot it without power cycling it, I'm all ears. And we're going to try F1.
It might be.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, yes. There it is. Look at that. That's so much nicer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, noise is noise, you know?
It's so much better for, the StreamYard compression can handle this one. So.
Right. Barely, but it's so okay. Here was the computer I was saving up for
the 800
when I got my job at Commodore.
John Riney says F12, then scroll down to reset.
But the reset just reset my computer, not the it just reset the virtual machine, not the MiSTer FPGA.
Oh, not the whole thing back to your machine selection. Yeah, we want to know, how do we get back to that first machine selection window? Yeah,
so here I am on an Atari 800, and I don't know anything to do.
You're typing DOS commands.
Yeah, well, I'm typing also Commodore commands, but
it gives you like the Atari 800 only it didn't even give a preamble to, hey, you're in this environment for basic or whatever, right? I assume it's just thrown you into a oh, we lost that. What's going on?
The video's cutting out. Probably the frame grabber.
Okay.
So what else do we have? So we said F12 and then reset.
Jamie says there's a reboot command. If you push F12 and then left arrow first, then down arrow. So this is the underlying Linux, which is putting this overlay menu in, right? So
I assume so, yes. And you can pause the emulation while the on-screen display is up.
You know what? Video mode. You've got video mode PAL as well, which probably shouldn't matter because it's digital, but that might be something that's causing your blackout.
Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Good eye! Good eye!
Never twice the same color.
Look at that! I'm surprised it worked. There is a pet. Let's look at the pet. Somebody's asking about the pet. So I am glad that the Atari. It's still doing it. I am glad that the Atari 800 looks better than it did, though.
So on the keyboard attachment, F12, arrow left, then down. Arrow right.
Oh, it remembered the F1. Oh, look at that. Now it's branded.
Woohoo. So this looks different. It's like each time it's doing a different gradient.
I hit F1 by accident and it branded it.
Oh, okay.
So there's various modes here.
Okay. So what else is in there though? Like how recent does it go? Atari ST is.
Oh, there's a pet.
Are there any Amigas in there?
I didn't see an Amiga. Let's check out the pet and then let's check out. Oh, I wish I remembered the bugs and stuff in BASIC. I used to know them. So I'm dealing with weird keyboard mappings.
All right, yeah. 20 go to 10.
The oldies but the goodies, right?
First run. First program anyone ever wrote in the 80s.
Right.
We're like, oh yeah. Andre's suggesting maybe another Easter egg here.
I don't know the Easter egg. Does anybody know the Easter egg?
Try this. Poke 2, 0, sys2.
All right, we'll try that, Andre.
That would be in the Commodore PET.
Right. Oh, let's show the PDP next. Or look for Amiga and then PDP.
Sure. The PDP is an interesting one. It doesn't
the poke is for entering the monitor, then maybe. Well, we'll try it here.
Yeah, poke 2, 0, sys2.
Oh, they're poking a 0 break instruction, a 0 page, and then jumping to it. So this will definitely break to the monitor. Yep. At site 3. But it's cool. It did what we thought it was going to. Think about that. You punch to 0 and then jump to it, right?
Well, it makes sense though, because you know how these cores probably have been built is someone took the ROMs and just grabbed the binary image from the ROMs, right? So
right.
It would make sense that it's all there.
So does anybody know about the PDP-1 emulation? What keys do I use to play Asteroids? That's my question for you. So we're going to go into the...
So PDP-1, this is real computer gaming history, because this is the first ever official video game that was ever done. It was on the PDP-1. I forgot which university lab it was at, but they built this. It had a tiny little round CRT screen, and this program did gravity and everything. It was all written in assembly language and hand assembled to machine code. And look at that, like it has the animated star, it has the animated sun in the middle and the stars, animated stars around, and animated spacecrafts. Yeah, but we don't know how to control it.
Right. My cursor keys are not controlling it. That's correct.
So they gradually succumb to the gravity of the star, and you have to be able to thrust and get around it. First ever video game. And the source code of this has gone all around the internet. There's even websites that have PDP-1 emulators written in Java that all play this.
Right.
So,
all right, let's try another one. So using global connectivity, streaming TCP/IP compressed video packets around the world to demonstrate a 1960s computer. There's something cool about that. Oh, here, I do know another Easter egg. Let's see if we can find it.
So someone was asking if Space War was even before the Table Tennis for Two, which was also then relates to Pong, which was Atari. Yes, Space War was 1962. So,
yeah, Terry Ryan wrote this one. Terry and Fred, so they're the.
He wanted his name in flashing lights.
It was an attribute, yes. Yeah, that my MiSTer is a little hot. I just got through unplugging and replugging it, trying to get the frame grabber going again.
That's something I don't understand. It's like, if they're going to release an FPGA that has all that power and not give it a heatsink pad on top and tell you to put a heatsink on it, I guess they just assume they do the statistical analysis on the thermals, and Intel just assumed most designs on average are going to be well under the power dissipation limitations of the package,
right?
And junction temperature limits. But now we do things like this, and we're always pushing it, right? So you'll need to glue a little heatsink on the top.
I'm about to get the cold spray.
Cold spray is a very good. Every workbench needs a cold spray or a can of freezer spray.
Well, I use it as a diagnostic.
So do I.
I'm using it as in the middle of a show.
I had a really nice hi-fi amplifier that was from the late 70s or early 80s. I think late 70s. A really nice hi-fi amplifier that I used well into, probably I had it until 2004, and then got rid of it when I was moving to America in 2005. But it had FET preamps, and I used freezer spray. One of them developed a noise, and at first I thought it was leaky capacitors. But I actually got a freezer spray, and each stage in the preamp was a single FET stage, and there were several of them, and I went from the front to back, and eventually got to one that I sprayed it with freezer spray, and the noise stopped instantly, and I'm like, that's the one.
Wow, yeah.
So very useful stuff to have around.
So yeah, I apologize. My MiSTer FPGA.
While you're letting it cool down, just unplug it and bring it over and give us a thorough going over the hardware side of it.
You mean on camera?
Yeah. Like, show us could you unscrew maybe and show us the different modules?
Let me try that. Here, let me solo.
Yeah, I'll do it. Well, I can. Yeah, I can't control your cameras, but I can
Right.
at least
There we
make
go.
your feed solid. There it is.
So ask everybody if the heat problem is normal.
Yeah, so I think you all could hear Bill say that, but the question is, Jamie Blank says it doesn't really overheat, but that's what we're suspecting here based on the dropouts of the video signal after running it for a while. So does anyone else have one of these where it gets a bit too hot?
Right.
Jamie's saying his
interaction.
Jamie says his will reach 100 degrees C on the core, but sort of stabilize there. And 100 is not too bad. It's probably rated to 150, but I don't like 100. I'd rather put a heatsink on and let it cool a little bit.
All right. So here's our Altera. It says ARM right on it. SoC ARM.
Yep. So it's a typical modern FPGA. It's really, I think they finally realized they're never going to soft IP core processors are never ever going to compete with an ARM or now maybe a RISC-V or whatever it is, right? So they might as well just include that.
Right. Here's an interesting comment. The C16 core is based on FPGA TED. So if they're able to integrate pre-existing work into it, that'd be cool.
While I'm not primarily on screen and you're going over the hardware, I actually just need to really quickly have a bio break. So I'll be right back, people.
All right. So let's see if it works now. Nope. I'm not seeing anything. Let me go back to split screen so y'all can see me instead of a blank screen. My MiSTer FPGA has stopped working. It's probably my frame grabber saying, look, you've been close to the edge for a while now. And it was even doing PAL, maybe. It sure looked like it was doing PAL. But now I can't get into the initial screen to check whether it's PAL or NTSC or whatnot here. So let's see. If anybody knows how to kick one of these in the tail, bigger hammer. Yeah, I've been there, done that. So I'm going to check the temperature on the FPGA, though. I'm just curious. Yeah, there's no real heat going on there right now. So I suspect my frame grabber. Let me try some. Ah, cool.
There it is.
Yep, I had to unplug and replug in my frame grabber. So it's probably not heat.
Maybe the frame grabber is getting too hot.
Yeah, frame grabber's not happy. Yeah. All right, so somebody said Amiga. I don't see an Amiga. What else were we looking for? Somebody else.
I was asking about that, but hey, look at that. There's an Altair 8800. Ooh. Question then, did the Altair
have a command line?
Exactly. Well, the first version just was a bunch of switches and LEDs, but I know over time they developed additional add-ons, and you could have a terminal interface to it, probably over an RS-232 port or something. So the Atari ST is an interesting one. I had my high school had one of those for the music department, and we used it as a drum machine.
Right, because of its MIDI?
Yes, it was used for MIDI composition and notation. The teacher would actually write music on it, and then it could print it out, and she'd photostat the music sheets for us. And it was really one of the best computers for music back in the day.
Oh, so how do I? Oh, okay, very good. So there is an arcade mode, and the first thing I got working on here was Pong, because it was the first computer I think I ever saw in my life was a Pong game. Ooh, some cool games here.
Joust was one of the first games I played. Lunar Lander, that's a classic.
Here we go. We see the Linux system thinking about it a little bit. So while this is happening, I'll tell people about Coriolis-effect.com. Go there, you'll find our Discord server. And again, I'm going to push the Discord server for MiSTer FPGA. They were incredible over there, helping me get this working in no time at all.
So what's their Discord? Do they have a link, or I can put it on the banner?
You know, I don't know their link. I tell people just to,
you know what,
Google it. So yeah, I had so I'm a new Chat GPT 4.0 user, and I had to let me Google that for you. I didn't know what the initials stood for.
LMGTF. So yeah. Mini-Mig apparently is, Mr. Landfill says it's got Mini-Mig in there.
Mini-Mig, got it.
There it is. So that must be some kind of
backwards.
How about that? Halted. What does that mean?
No kickstart loaded. Press F12 for settings. So back then we had to actually hand it a floppy disk every time.
Or you could choose which version of kits. Because, yeah, by the time I was playing with Amigas, they had kickstart on ROM. Wheel driver.
I don't know what that is. I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know what I was doing back in the day. You know, we just kind of felt our way through.
So that's for your hard disk.
IDE, right.
What's in system there? Maybe you still need to get the ROMs for the Amiga.
Yes, that's what somebody is.
Add them to your SD card. Yeah, yeah.
Right, Mr. Landfill said that. All right. We also have consoles on here. It's booting again. Appreciate. So somebody that's interesting. The Kickstart ROMs are owned by Cloanto. I'll be talking with the guy that runs Cloanto at VCF East on April 14th, 15th, and 16th.
The question, who is Cloanto? For pardon my ignorance, is that the Italian company that purchased?
No, it's not. They own the trademark, not the they own the copyright, not the trademark. Is the reality? Yeah, I think
there was that other company in Italy that bought the trademark.
Massimo, right?
Yeah,
and I talk with Massimo occasionally, but I never know what thought he's having. You know, there's always a translation problem. Ooh, let's see if there's any games included. Oh,
that's cool.
That wasn't what I selected, but that's cool. And no keys are working for me, but it looks cool. All right. So I don't know what else to show other than keep exploring at everybody else's expense here.
So what else? But no, I wanted to finish looking at that hardware too. So what else is so obviously this is something that runs on the D10 Nano, but you're going to have an SD card with all the ROMs on it. What's in utilities there? I'm curious about that too. Oh, it's got an Arduboy. That's funny. What's in
utility?
What can you do in that? ADC tests. Oh, okay, input tests, memory tests. Not bad. I guess so. I assume that the way this goes is you can get your own console hardware and wire it up to the GPIOs, and then configure it for multiplayers and joysticks and all that stuff.
Right.
Mega Duck is probably Mega Drive, right?
What else we got?
Wait, there's something in there. Did Casio have a game console, or is that emulating a scientific graphing computer?
Oh, that's interesting. I'll go back there in a second and check. Let's see if we can get. Oh, look, the 2600 doesn't have a date, so maybe it's not a valid.
AY-3- was a prefix for chips that were eventually became part of Microchip. But who was that company? Was it GI? Who was that semiconductor company, Bill, that made chipsets for these machines in the 70s and 80s?
I'm trying to think.
There was GI.
General Instruments.
General Instruments is one of them, but they may actually be the one. They were eventually acquired by Microchip, which back then was called Arizona Microchip. Eventually, they realized, like all companies that grow, you can't keep a specific location in your name. And all of their chips were prefixed with AY-3- something or other. I remember that because the Commodore 64 MIDI interfaces we were building, I built one for a friend. The UART chip that we used was an AY-3- oh my gosh, what was that? 1015 or something. It was a UART chip. Real simple, unbuffered UART. Had a single shift register for transmit and a single shift register for receive.
Right.
And a 16 times oversampling.
Right.
For the receive. And those were used to build MIDI interfaces. There were a lot of, probably because one of the electronics magazines used that in a kit design back in the day, but those were the ones we used.
Right.
Those were the 6N138 optocoupler. Got your MIDI IO for a Commodore 64.
We were working on a MIDI cartridge for years during my tenure. One of the engineers that had been on the 128 and then got off the 128 went on to work on a MIDI cartridge or a token ring cartridge for the rest of his career there, and never turned product. So
Adam, what is the 8910? The AY-3-8910. That was, I know that had a place in some of these computers. Can't remember exactly what it was used for. Tell us what that chip was used for. Maybe that was a sound chip. Yeah, because GI actually had quite a few neat chips that were used in gaming, and they probably sold a lot of parts to the because for every 10 Commodore 64s in the world, there was at least one or two gaming machines built. So and now, like, that's still where a lot of the cash is in the gambling industry. I remember meeting some engineers back when I was in college who were employed by Gilbarco, and Gilbarco make gasoline pumps, petrol pumps in Australia,
right?
Or England. It's called petrol where I come from. But they also make gambling machines, so poker machines, gambling gaming consoles that you see at casinos. And there's almost as much for a long time. It's probably different now because the graphics are so much better now and the sound. But for a long time, there was as much computing power put towards making sure the game met standards for compliance for gambling standards and laws and statistics, as well as making sure the money readers and things were 100% accurate so people couldn't cheat them.
Right.
So, yeah.
Let's see. What other computers do we have? Oh, so you saw the Apple. That's why we clean the floor with Apple. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there and says Apple II. And I want to say this is exactly how the Apples worked of the day. They just did nothing. And I'm severely biased in my opinion of this. So don't quote me.
I had an Apple II at home for a short time, and my school also had, when I was in the 7th grade or so 1987, the school library had an Apple IIe, and it booted straight into BASIC. But then from there, you put floppies in and load.
And I suspect that's what's needed for the Apple II is that you have to load BASIC.
Probably missing the BASIC ROM, and it's just doing the logo and then sitting on a bunch of knobs.
So let's my favorite here. If the display cooperates.
Yeah, there it is. Dolphin DOS.
Dolphin DOS. Yes, that jumps right out at you, doesn't it? Oh, I used to work so hard to make a 128 show 64 mode be 38911 bytes free. As we developed the 128, that started at like 1,000 bytes free, which meant it hit a memory error. And then I'd get 12,000 bytes free. And then and eventually one day it was 38,911, and it stayed that way. I never went backwards after I got all the memory working.
Yeah, that was the whole mission, right? You knew the computer was working if it would do that.
Yeah. All right. So here's the answer to the ROMs is, so I'm looking at the MiSTer FPGA as kind of a major ingredient in still what looks like a roll your own console, right? You still got to go get your joysticks. You got to get the right analog to make the joystick works, the keyboard mappings, extra storage. I noticed in the C128, there was an REU emulation. Basically the RAM disk emulation is built in, which is very cool because it's only memory actually. So let's see. Yeah, no Easter eggs in the 64 that I know of, unless anybody else knows about one. Okay, so you asked about ROMs. Let's go back into 128 and I'll show you the function ROMs.
All right. Oh my gosh. DE10 nanos are inflated because of MiSTer FPGA.
Probably.
You go to the actual Thoracic website. They're asking $225.
Oh, that's about what I paid. Probably. I probably paid 180 4 years ago. If you go to the Tera,
if I search for DE10 Nano, Adafruit is selling them for 150.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but they probably and they have 23 in stock. Come on!
Wow!
I am not going to buy one today.
No.
I'm sorry. You know what? That's you know why? It's because it's a DE0. It's not a 10.
And Riney fell into that trap. He got
I
DE.
searched for DE10 and it throws me DE0s on the. Anyway, eBay. Someone's selling the whole kit on eBay, but it's probably used for $170.
Wow, that sounds wrong. Just knowing that the kits.
DE10 Lite is 180. So yeah, I guess. They are actually not that cheap, really. Yeah.
So look at this. I can turn on IEC's the name for the serial bus in Commodore World, and our default devices were 8 and 9. So you can emulate your disk drives, but I'm not sure where you go to get the it's up to everybody to go get their own games, ROMs, whatever.
Well, you have to, because they're copyright software.
That's right.
And for a long time, all through the 90s, there were 64 emulators, like CCS 64 were wonderful, and there were websites. So all the downloads were in one place, so you didn't have to sign in. Just someone out of their own enthusiasm for the games and the product. But nobody cared, because retro computing wasn't a thing in the 90s.
Right.
It was just for people to keep something alive, because it was something they loved growing up. And then obviously, as retro computing became a hobby, an actual hobby, where millions of people are wanting to do it, I guess the copyright owners are like, hey, wait a second. They started noticing.
Right. So this is pretty cruel. That you can set the jail bars 3 different strengths. So I've got it set to maximum, but now somebody's just being cruel.
What caused the jail bars in the original?
So it will sound like common stuff to us today, but back then we didn't know how to pin out a chip. We used the corner pins. 40 was VCC and 20 was ground.
You were just sticking with TTL and CMOS conventions. What's wrong with that?
Right.
Boards didn't have planes in those days. If you were lucky, no ground, you could have 2 layers, and you'd run power and ground.
Yes.
On the bottom layer, and that's why they were done that way, because you'd run a power and ground between. You put all your chips in columns,
right,
lined up.
You can grid them.
And you run VCC down one side and power down the other, and
right. Except that you didn't want to interdigitate. You wanted to make sure that they went all, power and ground went all the way across. You didn't want to bring power from one side and ground from the other, because then the inductance path is huge.
But it also meant routing for memory was easier, because you could have all your address and data lines in parallel with your power and ground as well. So
right. So here's where I was heading with this, as Johan mentions, that the video output is located in the middle of a bunch of digital outputs, and you combine that with limited. But I never thought back in the 80s, we just turned the contrast down, it looked fine, right? Every TV was adjustable.
Yeah.
I never dawned on me to go to them and say, can we move the pins, the pin order? I could have asked for that. I didn't know to ask for it back then. I left that to the chip guys. But nowadays, I'd be, as a guy that knows a little about SI, can't we put the power and ground pins right next to each other? And,
Yeah, well, in this case, it's probably crosstalk on the board itself, because those pins
I ruled that
next
out.
to each other.
I ruled that out early on, because I did see the jail bars, and I proved they were coming out of the chip. I dislocated everything, and I had jail bars straight out of the chip.
Oh, so it's actually in the...
It's crosstalk in the chip. It's probably ground lifting in the chip, and capacitive coupling and crosstalking. And I mean, picture one power lead for this whole thing. It's making NTSC. It's controlling DRAMs. It's talking on a microprocessor bus, and it's using one pin to ground it.
Yep. Kids these days, they don't know how easy it is.
Back in my day, I had one ground pin, and I was lucky to have it. Luxury. Hey, did you get the video I sent about Australian wines?
I did. I did.
A licorice flavor. No, it was a mint flavored Bordeaux or something like that.
That was made in the probably mid 70s, that video.
Yeah.
And the British snobbery is unbelievable. They're making fun of Australian wines like they're all just terrible. And the actual truth is, European wines are can be really good, but a lot of them are really bad compared to Australian wines. But
Right.
Anyway, I may be biased because I'm from there, but I do know red wines, and good Australian wines are actually. So it was funny, but not super funny to me.
See, I thought it was pretty funny being a Yank. Yeah. Hang on, I'm going to post the. So we're talking about Monty Python. If that's not obvious to. Here, I'll post the Monty Python reference because I'm a Monty Python kind of guy.
Well, everyone in Australia loves Monty Python, and general British humor is the same, right? As Australian humor, because they're very British, because they were a bunch of convicts once upon a time from Britain.
So somebody just wrote that the Victu on C64 Reloaded, I assume he means the cost reduced model.
No, the C64 Reloaded is.
Yeah, what is that?
That's the new. That's a new replacement PCB you can buy. So if you have an old dead board, you can take
it's like Johan's work for the 128.
So the 64 Reloaded board still has jail bars, but it appears to be from AEC. I'm not sure what you mean by AEC.
AEC is address enable control, and it's what when it hits, the contention starts on the bus because one processor starts to lift and capacitively charge. The other guy's going, oh, fuck, fine, I'm getting out of here. But, and so AEC is the spikiest time of the processor cycle.
Right. So it's still just crosstalk from the chips. But the question there that I have, and I assume that the 64 Reloaded board is probably much like the 128 Neo, an exact replica of the original C64 board, only it probably has additional ground polygon ports.
Yeah, everybody's doing that. Yeah.
So it's got probably slightly better signal integrity, but we're still getting this, right? Yeah.
So Johan, is that a 4-layer board? I forget the Neo.
I think Johan, his board is just a direct duplication of the 128, but with
it might be
it'd be interesting actually, like, you've probably all seen Dave Jones's EEV blog with that other 8-bit computer where he did a 4-layer board and added ground planes to show the difference in signal integrity. Definitely worth watching that, because it's just like gives you quite a profound. He was using his near field probes as well with it.
Right.
It makes a profound difference having ground planes.
Yeah.
Of course, it totally changes the impedance of the traces, but when you're dealing with TTL or CMOS and it's 2 megahertz clock speeds, 8-bit retro computing, signal integrity back then wasn't a thing. It was, but it wasn't.
We had the time to wait for the reflections to die down. That was the major thing.
Yeah, and actually, when they covered this when I was first in college in the early 90s, and they taught us about this in our digital electronics classes, they're like, we're actually using reflections to get our digital signal to get to 5 volts really quickly.
Right.
Where it's the reflections that make that happen. But here we are years later with high-speed serial buses. You can't tolerate it. So
right. And we used to use series resistors left and right, because at a megahertz you just wait 10-15 nanoseconds for the reflections to stop. So that's funny. The impedance of my traces on the 128 are between 100 and 120, I think. There's just no ground near almost anything, just other traces. So except the DRAM section. The DRAM section we laid out first, and that is a good gridding. I literally didn't have to worry about the DRAM VCC rails. That was the one thing I didn't have to worry about. Yeah.
Now the layout. Tell me about the layout process there, because at the time there was a team doing that using SI cards on dedicated, mini
That's right.
Right.
So
So sidecards probably eventually evolved into something like Mentor or Cadence. I don't know where. You could go on Wikipedia and you'll see the history. I think they were absorbed by Mentor or Cadence right along the way, like most of those EDA companies were. But did you guys know it? Like, first lay out the chip, like the parts placement was probably done by you before it went to that team, right?
Right.
Because you were thinking, like, the pinouts, the parts, you've prototyped things on wire wrap, and you know what's going to work out best for layout. So you, as the engineer, and knowing how to meet FCC requirements, you're going to, and I say this, even now, the probably number one important input to good routing on a board is your parts placement.
Right.
So how did you do that back then?
We started with the mechanical. So we had input. We knew what size, and Rick Hartley would love this. The panel size on a 128 is so you can get two boards per panel almost exactly with enough rim around. So that set the size of the housing. Then the housing guys put the connectors around it, and that set where I'm probably going to put my I/O chips. And then there's a can in there for RF shield that has a height requirement. So that got set. And then it was like, okay, let's sprinkle in the chips now to accomplish this.
That's the nice thing about computer design, is that you had the luxury of designing it from the board first.
Yeah,
like
from the ground up.
From the inside out.
Yeah.
Whereas, now, like most products, you're going to have to design them from the outside in. Some industrial designer comes up with this funky shape in Fusion or whatever tool they're using, and they're like, it has to look like this. Right. And then you have to figure out how the electronics is going to fit into that. It's a real bear.
Right. So you asked about the process. We hand laid out the +4, the one that came right before that. And then I got Terry Fish involved from my old company, and he started coming up to speed on all the stuff that's going on in the background. So by the time we did the 128, he was working off the sidecards, and originally we tried plugging it into a VAX, and it just the VAX slowed to a halt, right? Because it's now a display controller. So Fish actually got his own sidecar, or his own VAX, just to plug in the S100 bus card or whatever it was. And so when I say it was a $70,000 workstation, or 110 or some, that was 1980s dollars, but it was true. He used the VAX as a workstation.
That's crazy money. That would be like, a house today.
Oh yeah.
Easily more than a house today.
Right. And yet we hand laid out the year before.
So you were involved in the layout of the +4 using tape and Mylar?
Right. We actually went to 4th generation in Bristol, Pennsylvania for a bunch of our layout back then. And so I was on the road. I would actually have to drive to our layout house, look at the stuff, say, that's fine, move this, and then drive back to Westchester. So those were long days. So getting Fish involved was paramount too. And he did almost every Commodore computer that ever came out that was CAD done. So he was a good buy for those guys. So, well, hey, look at the time. It has been an hour.
Wow, it has.
So I wish we could have shown more about the, Electron Ash. You missed the part about the FPGA itself, but Ben, we should really tear into FPGAs someday, talk about lookup tables and those kind of things.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's not like there aren't other videos on YouTube about it, but
what the heck?
It's more fun for people when we talk about these.
That's right. That's
right. Right.
Because we like electronics.
Yeah.
Actually, as a kid, electronics was my escape from living in Indiana. Which is you probably have an Indiana in Australia. I just don't know what part of the country that'd be, but
I don't know. A lot of the countries probably like it.
Yeah, probably anything not near the ocean.
I grew up in the northern suburbs of Sydney, in a town called Hornsby, which was pretty cool. It's a nice place. It's still reasonably nice. Although I'm about to find out what's changed because I'm going there
Right.
next week. So that brings me to another point. Next time we stream, I'll be trying to jump on in a different time zone and might be a bit sleepy. So forgive me.
Oh,
it'll be 4 a.m.
Let's assume there won't be one next week unless we say there is one. How's that?
Well, next week is Good Friday, and I'll have just landed and probably be very jet lagged. So,
okay. So
yeah, next week we're not. But
okay.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that. I think Sydney's like Boston. It's an older city, dense roads, too much traffic, reasonable public transport, but it's crowded. But then I've never been to Indiana, so I can't say. But it's probably like growing up in the country where the farms are.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And there's a lot of little country towns in Australia that are all beautiful and have amazing coffee shops and things to do and see, and awesome food.
Now,
but yeah, not much to do for kids growing up. So it's true. Like, I think a lot of good software engineers wind up coming from those places,
right?
Because
right.
they get something like that when they're a kid and they're just enamored with it, and that's what they do.
Yeah, so, that's their escape.
Yeah.
So is there a noticeable rural accent in Australia? I assume there is.
For the most part, everyone sounds the same. There are subtle differences in Queensland and subtle differences, I think, in some parts of maybe Western Australia. Just where it gets really hot, people tend to speak a little bit more slowly, but pretty much all the same, I think.
We do that down south. Our southern states speak slower, and but yeah, we have everything from Boston to Texas here.
There's a lot of accents in America, but there are even more in England. Or not, I shouldn't say England, I should say the United Kingdom. There's dozens of accents. Yeah.
So
Bogan. Cool. Yes, Bogan, that's right.
All right.
Nobody likes Bogan.
So, well, we don't know. We won't be back next unless I grab a guest host or something. But stay tuned. We'll see if maybe 2 weeks from now we do something. We'll see what Ben's like at 4 in the morning. He might be jet lagged, so he's awake anyways. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll see how we go. But 2 weeks from now should be okay.
All right.
It'll be early in the morning. But I'll make it happen somehow. I'll set an alarm and talk quietly so I don't wake anyone up.
Right. So, okay, excellent. So thank you everybody for joining, and we will see everybody next time.
Yep.